They call us humans the apex predators, but they don't understand. It's not the strength or numbers that make us dangerous. It's our ability to adapt, to learn, and to strike from the shadows without warning. The War Council convened on Vista, the heart of the Galactic Coalition. A circular chamber buzzed with tension as leaders from a dozen star systems debated in frustration. The threat had grown like a specter haunting their forces, silent, invisible, and deadly. The room fell quiet as the elder of the Cavern, a species known for their strategic prowess, spoke. His voice was a low rumble, resonating with ancient wisdom. You do not fear the human. You fear what you cannot see. They are predators, masters of patience. The sniper is their deadliest tool, a phantom that kills without ever being seen. A murmur spread across the chamber. The fear was real, not just among the soldiers on the front lines, but here, in the very heart of their command. We have lost 3 battalions this week, a reptilian general hissed, his scales glistening under the chamber's light. No alarms, no explosions, just gone, vaporized by a single shot. They are breaking us, an amphibian diplomat croaked, his eyes wide with anxiety. How do we fight an enemy we cannot find? The elder leaned forward, his expression grave. You cannot fight them on their terms. You must make yourself unpredictable. Change your patterns, disrupt their routines. But even then, you will be playing their game. Then how do we win? The coalition leader demanded, slamming a clawed fist on the table. Silence lingered, thick with uncertainty. In the shattered ruins of a once thriving colony, a lone figure crouched atop a crumbling tower. His breath slow, controlled. Eyes scanning the horizon through a high-powered scope, Lieutenant Kane, a human sniper. The coalition forces called him a ghost. He was fine with that. It made the job easier. He adjusted the scope slightly. Following the movement of a coalition patrol far below, they moved in tight formation, wary, their anxiety almost palpable, even from this distance. Kane allowed himself a smile. Fear was his ally. It made them predictable. And in this game, predictability was death. His rifle was silent, a sleek, deadly tool that could take a life from miles away. He waited, patient as the hunt demanded. The patrol paused, and a leader raised his head as if sensing something. Kane's finger hovered over the trigger. A breath. A shot. The leader's head snapped back, a burst of purple mist replacing where his skull had been. The patrol scattered, but they wouldn't find him. Not before he took another life, and another. By the time they regrouped, only 2 of the 6 remained, trembling, broken. Kane exhaled, the rifle cooling in his hands. He had already melted back into the shadows, retreating to a new position, before their panicked cries echoed through the ruins. Vista's war room buzzed with new reports. Another patrol lost another segment of their forces, torn apart by an invisible enemy. The coalition's most elite hunters, sent to eliminate the human snipers, had yet to return. Every attempt to draw them out had failed, turning the hunters into the hunted. The elder Cavern rubbed his temples, a gesture of deep thought. These humans, they turn our strengths into weaknesses. They make us fear every shadow, every moment of stillness. We must evolve, or we will continue to fall prey to their methods. We cannot afford more losses. The coalition leader barked, eyes narrowing as he scanned the room. Deploy the Omega Squadron. Make them unpredictable. It's time to end this ghost. Orders were relayed across the galaxy, the command sent to the coalition's most feared warriors. Elite beyond compare. The Omega Squadron specialized in tracking and eliminating high-value targets. If anyone could take down a human sniper, it was them. Kane watched as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in twilight. Night was his element, the darkness his ally. His senses were sharp. Every rustle of wind, every shifting shadow noted and logged. He knew the coalition would send their best. They always did. He welcomed the challenge. A flicker of movement caught his eye. The Omega Squadron moved like specters themselves, their stealth suits blending with the environment, nearly invisible even to him. Kane allowed a sliver of respect. These weren't the usual soldiers, these were hunters. But he was no prey. The first shot came from them, a pulse of energy that cracked the air where Kane's head had been a second earlier. He rolled, the motion fluid, already moving to a new position as the terrain exploded behind him. They had good tech, but Kane had something better. He had patience. He let them come closer, their confidence growing with every missed shot. They thought they were closing in on him. That was their first mistake. A sharp, clean shot rang out, and one of the Omega Squadron fell, a perfectly placed bullet through the visor. The others immediately scattered, but Kane had already shifted again, his presence a fleeting shadow in the night. The hunt had begun in earnest. The Coalition's finest were about to learn what it truly meant to face a human sniper. The Omega Squadron's advance, they had faced numerous threats across the galaxy, but this was different. The terrain was hostile, but it was the invisible enemy that made their hearts pound in their chests. The human sniper had already claimed one of them. They couldn't afford another mistake. Their leader, Omega-1, signaled a halt. The squadron spread out, taking cover behind the jagged remains of what once might have been a towering monument. Their sensors scanned the area, picking up the faintest heat signatures, motion, anything that could give them an edge. But there was nothing. Just the eerie silence that seemed to wrap around them, pressing on their nerves. Omega-1 clenched his jaw. He knew the sniper was close, but where? A sudden ping on his visor, movement left flank. He turned, raising his rifle, but it was too late. Another shot, and Omega-2 crumpled to the ground, a smoking hole in his helmet. Fall back. Regroup, Omega-1 ordered, his voice tight with tension. But even as they moved, another shot rang out, this time from a different direction. Omega-3 went down, his suit flickering as it powered off, the life inside extinguished. Omega-1's eyes darted, scanning for any sign of their attacker. He felt the chill of realization creeping in. This wasn't just a sniper. This was a predator playing with his prey, leading them into a trap. He barked another order, shifting their formation, trying to throw off their assailant. But deep down, he knew. The sniper was already 10 steps ahead, and every second they hesitated, every wrong move, was another step toward their demise. From his new perch, Kane observed the Omega Squadron with a mix of admiration and cold calculation. They were skilled, no doubt about it. They moved with a discipline that he rarely saw in Coalition forces. But skill alone wasn't enough. Not against him. They had split up, a smart move under normal circumstances. But out here, in the darkness, it only made them easier targets. He adjusted his scope, zeroing in on Omega-4. The soldier was moving cautiously, eyes sweeping the area, but his movements were too deliberate, too careful. It was clear he was trying to draw Kane out. Kane let the crosshairs settle on the soldier's chest. He could take the shot now, end it quickly. But he hesitated, letting the moment stretch. He wanted them to feel the fear, to know that their lives hung by a thread. The squadron leader was directing them from the center, his presence a focal point of their defense. Kane shifted his aim. Take out the leader, and the rest would crumble. A breath. A heartbeat. The shot was perfect, but Kane didn't fire. Not yet. He watched as Omega-1 moved, his commands sharp, trying to maintain control. They were close to breaking, but not quite there. A flicker of motion on the periphery of his vision. Omega-5 was circling, trying to flank him. Kane almost laughed. These Coalition elites thought they were hunting him, but they were walking straight into his trap. He fired. Omega-4 dropped, his armor clattering as he hit the ground. Immediately, the remaining squad members broke formation, the chaos Kane had been waiting for. Omega-1's voice crackled through their comms, desperate now, issuing orders that were lost in the panic. Kane shifted positions, moving like a shadow through the rubble, always staying one step ahead. The remaining squad members were on edge, firing into the darkness at any hint of movement. Kane stayed low, his senses attuned to every sound, every tremor. He was the predator, and this was his domain. Omega-5 made a move, trying to get a bead on Kane's position, but the human sniper was already gone. A sharp crack echoed and Omega-5's body hit the ground, lifeless. That left two. Omega-1 and Omega-6. Kane could feel their desperation, their fear. They were cornered, and they knew it. The Coalition war room was in disarray. Reports from the battlefield were coming in sporadically, each one more dire than the last. The Omega Squadron, their best, was being systematically picked off. "This is impossible," the Coalition leader muttered, his claws digging into the armrest of his chair. "How can one human do this?" The Elder Cavern was silent, his mind working through the possibilities. "It is not the human that is the threat. It is their nature. They adapt, they learn, they survive. And in this darkness, they thrive. We need to pull them out," a general insisted, "before it's too late." But the Elder shook his head. "It is already too late." The moment they engaged, they were already dead. Kane moved swiftly, repositioning for the final confrontation. Omega-1 was shouting into his comms, demanding backup, but none would come. Kane had ensured that before he took his first shot. Communications were down, the reinforcements led astray. He found a vantage point with a clear view of the last two soldiers. They were huddled together now, back to back, scanning the darkness with frantic eyes. Their fear was palpable, and Kane felt a satisfaction. Omega-1 fired wildly into the shadows, but Kane wasn't there. He was already lining up his next shot. The muzzle flashed, and Omega-6 fell, his body slumping against the rubble. Omega-1 froze, his weapon trembling in his hands. Kane watched him for a moment, then moved, circling around, taking his time. Omega-1's breathing was ragged, his composure shattered. He knew he was alone, the last of his squad. Kane didn't give him the chance to recover. A final shot echoed through the night, and Omega-1 collapsed, his body joining the others in the cold embrace of the ruins. The battlefield fell silent once more. Kane lingered in the darkness, listening to the silence that followed the end of the Omega Squadron. The Coalition's finest had fallen, and with them, any hope the enemy had of reclaiming this sector. The humans had once again shown why they were feared across the galaxy. His mission wasn't over, though, far from it. Kane knew that with the loss of their elite squad, the Coalition would be desperate, more unpredictable than ever, and desperation made them dangerous. He moved through the ruins, his senses alert, always watching, always listening. Every shadow was a potential threat, every sound a possible ambush. But Kane was prepared. He had learned to survive in the harshest environments, to thrive where others would falter. His earpiece crackled to life, a voice cutting through the static. "Lieutenant Kane, come in." Kane tapped his comm, responding in a low tone. "Go ahead. Command has new orders. Intel suggests the Coalition is mobilizing a last-ditch effort. They're pulling back to a stronghold just outside your location. We need you to neutralize their command center. If we take them out now, we can break their hold on this system." Kane nodded, his mind already calculating the best approach. Understood, moving to target. The stronghold was heavily fortified, a towering structure that had once been a center of commerce before the war. Now it served as the Coalition's last refuge, a final bastion in a crumbling empire. Kane knew it would be heavily guarded, but that didn't deter him. It was just another challenge to overcome. He approached the stronghold under cover of darkness, using the terrain to his advantage. The Coalition had set up automated turrets and patrols, but their movements were predictable, the patterns easy to discern. Kane slipped past the outer defenses with practiced ease, his rifle ready in his hands. Inside, the stronghold was a maze of corridors and fortified rooms, each one more secure than the last. But Kane had his route planned, each step carefully calculated. He moved like a ghost, silent and unseen, his presence only marked by the bodies left in his wake. The Coalition's command center was deep within the stronghold, a fortified room surrounded by thick walls and guarded by the last of their elite forces. But Kane was undeterred. He had faced worse odds before. He positioned himself outside the command center, listening to the muffled voices inside. The Coalition leaders were frantic, their commands disjointed, their fear evident in their tone. Kane could almost taste their desperation. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was the moment, the culmination of his mission. He placed a charge on the door, setting it to breach. The explosion was deafening, shattering the door and sending debris flying into the room. Kane was inside before the smoke cleared, his rifle up, his finger on the trigger. The coalition leaders didn't stand a chance. He moved silently, each shot finding its mark, each target falling before they could react. In seconds, it was over. The command center was silent, the coalition's leadership wiped out in a matter of moments. Kane stood in the middle of the room, his breathing steady, his rifle cooling in his hands. He surveyed the destruction, his expression cold, calculating. The mission was a success, but Kane felt no satisfaction, no pride. This was his duty, his purpose. And there was always another mission, another target. His earpiece crackled to life again, the voice of his commander cutting through the silence. "Good work, Lieutenant. The coalition is in full retreat. They won't be a threat in this sector anymore." Kane nodded, already turning to leave. "What's the next target?" The voice on the other end paused, as if considering the question. "Stand by for now. You've earned a rest." But Kane knew there was no rest for him, not yet. The war was far from over, and as long as there were enemies to fight, he would be there, in the shadows, the unseen predator that hunted the darkness. He moved through the stronghold, slipping out into the night. The battlefield was quiet now, the coalition's forces broken, their leadership decimated. But Kane knew better than to let his guard down. The galaxy was vast, and there were always new threats, new enemies. As he disappeared into the night, the human sniper left no trace, no sign of his presence. Only the cold, hard truth that the coalition had learned too late: humans were not to be underestimated. They were not just survivors, they were hunters, and the galaxy was their hunting ground. And as long as there were battles to be fought, as long as there were enemies to defeat, the humans would be there, striking from the shadows, adapting, surviving, and winning. Because in the end, there was only one truth that mattered: victory. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says, we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.